Ken Trujillo is a founding member of the Trujillo, Rodriguez, and Richards law firm, former city solicitor of Philadelphia, and assistant United States attorney. He was also appointed by Governor Ed Rendell to serve as commissioner of the Pennsylvania Gaming Commission, Control Board rather, and nominated by Governor Tom Corbett to serve on the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. Recently, he has moved into the communications sector with his ownership of El Sol, WHAT 1340 AM, and management of Azteca Philly Television. In sum, Ken Trujillo is a very busy man. Please welcome him for our first tribute to our honoree.
Thank you, Mickey. Mickey and David were commenting on how well-behaved this crowd was, and I'm a bit embarrassed, I have to say. This really is a well-behaved crowd, Mickey. I don't understand it. I think they're intimidated by you, or perhaps it's the presence of greatness. But Mickey, Your Excellency, Audrey, I guess I have to say, yo, welcome to Philadelphia. While we're here today to honor Raul Yzaguirre, I have to say, I've got to recognize the person that made this tribute possible. And I don't think we can pass without recognizing a little bit of Mickey's contributions, because they're really legion. And some of you know that Mickey served in the Clinton White House as the director of Intergovernmental Affairs for Bill Clinton. So in that role, Mickey was the White House liaison with the nation's mayors and governors. What you don't know, a couple of you heard the story, but most of you don't know, is that Mickey also played a critical role here in Philadelphia and in a couple pretty significant events. First, when I was city solicitor, Mickey was instrumental in convincing me and then Mayor Street to join with Secretary Andrew Cuomo in settling our handgun lawsuit against Smith & Wesson. And it was a historic settlement that was brought about largely by the intervention of Mickey Ybarra when he was the director of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mickey was also on point with Ed Rendell, when Ed Rendell was mayor, in getting the National Constitution Center here to Philadelphia. So much so that Ed Rendell made it a point to let Mickey know that he wanted to give him a personal tour of the National Constitution Center. And so guess what, about 5 years ago, sure enough, Ed Rendell gave a one-on-one tour to Mickey Ybarra to show him some of his good work. So Mickey, thank you for what you've done, not just for the Latino community, for our country, but yo, you are a Philadelphian. As Mickey said, and a few of you have heard me say before, our stories are critical, particularly in an era where we have a cacophony of technology that seems to drown out any ability to build personal relationships, where folks communicate more by tweet than by talk. Maya, to embarrass you a bit, I was reminded of this especially when we went last year to see the fireworks, and my daughter, my lovely daughter Maya, who most of you know I love an awful lot, is there taking photographs of the fireworks in order to send them to her friends to show what she's experiencing as opposed to experiencing them, right? It's more important these days to chronicle what we have done and what we're doing and what we've seen than to enjoy it. It's more important to communicate our points and our things that we're doing and what we've ate, like anybody really cares, than to actually enjoy what we're eating. And in that kind of an era, the telling of our stories, Mickey, you are 100% right, is critical in us understanding each other. Now, like Jim Eisenhower, my friend, I love a new audience, and since a few of you have not heard this story, I'm going to tell you but a quick one of my life. My father, and Bonnie, you'll like this, my father was an evangelical minister, and when I was 5 years old, I said, I want to be a preacher. In fact, I want to preach tonight, and this was for the Christmas service. So my father said, okay. He put a little chair behind the pulpit, put me up there. I looked, it was about this many people. I looked around and said, arrepiéntense pecadores y no miren tanto para acá. For those of you that are linguistically challenged, that means repent, you sinners, and don't look up here so much. That was my last sermon. I decided I wanted to be a lawyer instead. Wikipedia says, in its understated sometimes way, Raul Humberto Yzaguirre is an American civil rights activist. Currently a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He previously served as the president and CEO of the National Council of La Raza from 1974 to 2004. On November 30th, 2009, he was nominated to be the ambassador to the Dominican Republic and was confirmed by the Senate on September 29th, 2010. What Wikipedia doesn't tell you is what we know, and that is that Raul Yzaguirre is a giant, he's a servant, he's a warrior, he's a hero. I know of no person that's done more to better the lives of Latinos in the United States than Raul Yzaguirre. During his 30 years as the CEO of NCLR, Raul helped extend federal civil rights laws, restore benefits for legal immigrants that were eliminated in 1996, expand access for Latinos to early childhood education, elementary education, secondary education, push through an executive order on Hispanic educational excellence, expanded earned income tax credit for working families, helped mold NAFTA, and to ensure that it was meeting the needs of the Latino community. In short, Raul built NCLR and through NCLR, its affiliates, to become the most powerful voice for the Latino community in the United States. The consistent presence at the NCLR conference of presidential candidates of the who's who of America, not just America, presidents from Mexico, from around the world, really showed and continued to ably demonstrate what Raul's work with NCLR has meant. So, yes, he truly has shown himself to be a giant in the United States and across the world. But he's a servant as well. Although his influence, his career have spanned really a legendary span around this country, you need only spend a few minutes with Raul to understand his humility, his depth, his love, not just of mankind, but of people, right? Of individuals. I've heard it said that some people love mankind, it's people they can't stand. That's not Raul. In fact, Raul's journey into the civil rights movement began at the ripe old age of 15, Maya, when he organized the American GI Forum Juniors, an auxiliary of the American GI Forum for Hispanic veterans. And then isn't often said, but Mickey and Raul, veterans, he spent 4 years with the U.S. Air Force Medical Corps. Raul is a warrior. Over and over and over again, Raul challenged the status quo time after time, even when it was against his own best interest, his own personal interest. He never shied away from taking on, friend or foe, if he felt it was important for our community. Over the years, Raul spoke out against President Carter's immigration proposals, against President Bush for his stance on affirmative action, against President Clinton's nominations or lack thereof when they didn't reflect sufficiently the Latino communities. And he's never shied from criticizing companies when their working conditions do not do justice to our community. Raul's a hero. Last night I was reminiscing that when I first met Raul, I was a young lawyer at the Schneider law firm, and in one of my very first activities, I was a spokesperson for a fight against official English here in Pennsylvania. Raul came to Philadelphia to help, and did in fact, defeat that legislation, and it's never passed in Pennsylvania. And over the years, he's done that countless times, not in Pennsylvania. It doesn't matter, California, New Mexico, Texas, Florida. You name the city, you name the state, Raul is there, and he's been a hero, quite literally riding in to help save the day. I told my daughter, Maya, I wanted her here today because I wanted her to meet a true American hero. And I wanted her to meet the person that, next to my father, I admire more than anybody in the world. Mickey, I thank you for giving me the honor of paying tribute to a giant, a servant, a warrior, my hero, His Excellency Raul Humberto Yzaguirre. Thank you, Raul.
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to let Ken speak more often. Our honoree, Ambassador Yzaguirre, clearly has many champions, resulting from his distinguished career of service to our community and our country. And I say without fear of contradiction, he has no greater champion than his successor at NCLR, where Raul spent 30 years building the largest national constituency-based Latino organization and really think tank in Washington, D.C. No greater champion than his successor at the NCLR, Janet Murguia. Janet is preparing to open the annual NCLR convention in New Orleans, was unable to be with us, but she is here with us with a tape message that we'd like to share with you at this time.
Hello, everyone. I hope you are all enjoying this wonderful event. I truly regret that I'm not able to be there in person to honor someone I consider not a Latino leader, but the Latino leader, Raul Yzaguirre. As you know, Raul was my predecessor as president and CEO at NCLR. And I will always be grateful for his advice, wisdom, and generosity, not only during that transition, but in the years since. Raul's legacy at NCLR is still felt today. He took a regional organization focused on one community, Mexican Americans in the Southwest, and transformed it into the largest national Hispanic civil rights and advocacy organization in the United States. I don't think people fundamentally understand what it takes to build something like NCLR. It came at great personal cost and sacrifice to both Raul and his family. That is why we were so honored to name our own national headquarters as the Raul Yzaguirre Building. Raul was and remains a visionary. At a time when Latinos were not on anyone's radar screen, he understood that our rapid growth meant that someday we would become a force to be reckoned with. He realized very early on that our strength as a community would lie in unifying all the different Hispanic subgroups across the country into one common community with a common agenda. When people speak of the Latino community today, it is in many ways the culmination of Raul's vision decades ago. And Raul has added greatly to his legacy in the years since NCLR, fighting vicious anti-immigrant policies in Arizona and serving his country with great distinction as our nation's ambassador to the Dominican Republic. I think Henry Cisneros put it best. Raul is our North Star, strong, constant, and never wavering from his dream of seeing the Latino community take its rightful place in American life. Congratulations again, Raul, for this well-deserved honor. We love you.
Our final tribute will be delivered by former Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, Arturo Valenzuela. Like Janet Murguia, I also had the privilege of working with Arturo at the White House for the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, and was so proud of his nomination by President Barack Obama to be Assistant Secretary of State to Secretary Hillary Clinton, the first Latino political appointee to serve in that role. Secretary Valenzuela is a professor of government at Georgetown University. He changed his foreign travel this week to be able to join us to honor Ambassador Yzaguirre. Please welcome Arturo to the podium.
Thanks so much, Mickey, for that, and thank you so much for inviting me to this event. It means it's enormously for me. I must warn you though, Mickey, now that I'm back at Georgetown University, I speak only in 50-minute segments. So forget the 3-minute rule. No, for me, it's a real privilege. I've admired Raul Yzaguirre for all the reasons that Ken just mentioned, and Janet as well, for so long. But was surprised when I was appointed to the State Department in the first Clinton administration and became the highest-ranking political appointee among Latinos in the State Department at the time as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. And one day I get a call from Raul Yzaguirre, and he says he wanted to talk. And what he was really keen on was to see how Latinos might be able to play a bigger and greater role in international affairs and foreign policy issues. We had an interesting conversation. At the time, he was trying to revive the Hispanic Council on International Affairs, which is something that he did at that time. He was keen on trying to see whether the community could focus more on the Americas and to support our foreign policy objectives in the Americas. As a visionary, he understood that the well-being of many of the countries from which we come from is dependent on smart, effective U.S. foreign policy. So I was so impressed by Raul because I knew of him as somebody who went on strikes and fought for all of these various different causes that Ken mentioned. But he was also this visionary who was seeing this community grow, expand, mature, and deserved a role in the foreign policy arena as well. From there, he actually later on, he and Jose Villarreal convinced me to go on the board of NCLR, and in fact, we began to work on the board of NCLR to try to see how we could, in fact, add an additional component to the work that the organization was doing to strengthen the Latino community's involvement in international affairs. I later went back to Georgetown after that experience, and then as Mickey just said, went into the White House, continued to work with NCLR on international affairs issues, left, went back to Georgetown again, and then was appointed by President Obama as Assistant Secretary. And I can't tell you how proud I was when the President of the United States decided to appoint Raul Yzaguirre Ambassador to the Dominican Republic. And this is a whole phase of his career that most people don't realize. Raul Yzaguirre, the internationalist. In fact, we even served on the board of NDI, the National Democratic Institute, at one particular point. He always had this vision. And he's appointed ambassador to a country that is important to the United States. It's important because also the enormous presence of the Dominican community in the United States. I see Sid Wilson, who's on the board of, or was on the board of NCLR, or is on the board of NCLR here. And it was just a terribly proud moment when I heard that he was going to be nominated by the White House. I had control as Assistant Secretary, some control over the appointment of career people, but the White House reserved the appointment of political appointees. So this was an appointment. And Raul Yzaguirre did in the Dominican Republic what he has done throughout his whole life. He was an exemplary, phenomenal ambassador. Since my 3 minutes are almost up, Mickey, I'll just simply end by saying this. It just so happens that 2 days ago, I was at a luncheon in Washington, a restaurant, and somebody comes up to me and says, oh, you know, can I talk to you? My name is so-and-so. I'm a congressman in the Dominican Republic. And he said, I was one of your students at Georgetown. He was in the law school. He did take a class with me. I barely remembered this chap. And he said, I'm here with a delegation from the DR, and would very much like to meet with you. And I said, look, I'm sorry. I have to leave town. I'm going to a tribute for Raul Yzaguirre, in fact. And he later sent me a note. And in fact, this note that he sent me perhaps summarizes better than I could what Raul meant in his service in the Dominican Republic. This young congressman of the PRD, of the opposition party, writes to me and he says, El embajador Yzaguirre, en su paso por la República Dominicana, rindió una magnífica labor llena de respeto y compromiso. That really struck me. Respeto y compromiso. Respect and commitment. That's the tribute of a great ambassador. Thank you.
I remember going to a meeting when I was like 10, 11 years old, where the leaders in our community, the Mexican-American leaders, were trying to elect a constable who was from our community. Whispering Tom Mayfield, a former Texas Ranger, came in with his deputies and beat up on the meeting and threw everybody out. I went to school and I learned about freedom and justice and the American way, and then at night I would go and see these kinds of oppressive actions. So I became aware that there was a difference in terms of power and structure. You have to be an optimist to be in the civil rights movement. When I was a young teenager organizing with Dr. Garcia with the American GI Forum, they used to give you a certificate of appreciation. I never got one of those certificates of appreciation. And it devastated me at first. I said, you know, this is unjust. How can I be working for justice and be working in an unjust situation? And then I said, wait a minute. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this to get attention? Are you doing this to get recognition? And if that's what you're about, then do something else. When I first came to the National Council of La Raza, we were thought of as a Mexican-American organization, and indeed we were. And I offered another vision, a different vision of what could be. And I said, you know, what unites us as Latinos is much more important than what divides us. And so we began to turn the National Council of La Raza into a pan-Hispanic organization. And it was very difficult at first. I had a lot of opposition from my own community saying, you know, let's worry about Mexican Americans first, and then we'll worry about somebody else. And I felt that we needed to walk together. Now it's widely accepted. Everybody talks about Latinos as a community. Our kids will have no problem being first identified, not as Mexican Americans or as Puerto Ricans or as Cuban, but as Latinos. We decided that we were going to get an executive order on Hispanic education because we were falling so far behind. When I broached the idea with the White House, I was told that I was crazy, that it would be a cold day in hell before the President of the United States would sign such an executive order. And a few months later, maybe 6, 7 months later, George Bush, the first, signed an executive order just as we wrote it. I met this chief of staff later on and I asked him what the temperature was in hell. Martin Luther King said that you should judge a person by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. I think in this era, we need to say, judge a person by his actions and not by his accents.
Ambassador, on behalf of the Latino Leaders Network, I am pleased to present you with our Eagle Leadership Award for your outstanding contribution to our community and to our country. Congratulations.
Nomás quiero decirles que estoy muy agradecido y muy agradecido. We're a powerful community. We can do great things. I'm not fighting for just our community, I'm fighting for our country. The two are identical, they follow each other. We can be a great community and be a great country at the same time. Thank you, Mickey, for doing this. Thank you for all the accolades, all the friendships, and thank you for coming out tonight today. We need unity. We can have unity if we learn how to appreciate each other. Muchas gracias y buenas tardes.